Yes. Good morning, good afternoon, so on and so forth. Hope you're having a good morning so far, a good day so far. Can you all hear me? 5 people nodded. So that's enough. I don't need anybody else to listen. Title of this morning's Dharma talk is Facing a Jewel Mirror. So this comes from, as some of you already know, about every 6 months we change from doing Sandokai, a poem coming out of ancient China, and we do Hokkyo Zanmai, or the song of the Jewel Mirror Samadhi. And I believe we're doing that right now. So I gave a talk on this 8 or 9 years ago, a series of talks, about a dozen talks on this. And I pretty much forgot everything I said, so I don't have to draw on that information. However, the reason I use this kind of an image is because I often say that it's you're like looking at yourself. So that's of course the mirror is the image we have there for having a reflection come directly back, obviously. But this is also showing up everywhere. And so in the 9th century, Dongshan Lianqi was a Chinese word name for cave mountain. And his Japanese name is Tozan Ryokai, which you will hear if you do the lineage chant. You're familiar with that. He was the 38th patriarch after the Buddha, and the 10th after Bodhidharma, from the 6th century up to the 8th century. And so there's a lot of images in this song of the Jewel Mirror Samadhi that do a similar kind of thing, like hiding a heron in the moonlight. So hiding a white heron in the moonlight. So there's something there. They're the same, and yet they're not the same. And no matter what you do, you know where they are. You know what they are, but it's not so much about a positionality or some kind of relative knowledge that we often cling to or stir up or attach ourselves to. So the line in there is like facing a jewel mirror, image and form behold each other. Image and form. So there's form, and then there's the image, behold each other. And you could look at that logically or reasonably and say, nah, the mirror's not looking at you. Well, this is the kind of image or metaphor that is used all through not only non-theistic lineages as we have or we're studying here, but also through some theistic approaches. And I'm not going to go into those particularly, but it shows up everywhere to try to take some kind of a deep understanding of what this is for us as human beings living a particular life, and go deeply into that. What is it fundamentally? We know what it is relatively. I got to get to work, and the lawn needs mowing, or on and so forth. So we already know about all that, and we have our issues and our conversations and our disagreements and our agreements about all of that. We do this with our our neighbors, our friends, our mates, and we do it on our own mind with ourselves, back and forth. Should I or shouldn't I? And I often say, I'll say now, when you're saying should I or shouldn't I, you shouldn't do anything, because all that is the ego mind, the self-centered mind, kind of halfway complaining about not having enough information, and actually willing to take a stab at it no matter what, rather than wait. So another line is that is in the song of the Jewel Mirror Samadhi, or Hokkyo Zanmai, is turning away and touching are both wrong. So turning away from something touching something. So turning away is a kind of aggression or ignorance, and then going towards it is also incorrect. So it's just a way of using those kinds of images to help us work with our awareness, our bare attention about the nature of phenomena, whether it's the phenomena of this or the phenomena of our memory of that. Have you noticed that you can actually hear something and remember it? You can remember the sound. You can somewhat even evoke that sound in your mind stream. Very interesting area of consciousness that we so take for granted, and we don't naturalize it or normalize it in terms of what it is. We do that in terms of what we think it is. And what do we think it is? We think it's us. We think that we're hearing that. We think that we're having that intense feeling about this or about that. We are prisoners, if I may say it this way. I'm not particularly inventing this myself. We're prisoners of our own ideas, concepts, conclusions, and hopes and fears. And that may get very strong in your life, and it may back off and may get so weak that you decide you don't really even need to do anything other than just paint pictures or develop software or make a living. And I'm not here to disagree. I'm not saying you aren't. Maybe that will be all you need to do. However, it seems important when anything occurs, rather than just abandon what occurs for what we think about what occurs, is to see fundamentally what that occurrence is in its immediacy and in its depth. Very difficult to do that unless there's a strong mind training, unless we're spending some time sitting down, holding still, and watching the movement of the mind. In other words, and in the same words, training the mind to see clearly. Simply put, it's what we're doing is we're exercising that witnessing aspect of the mind, so that when anything comes into the mind stream, regardless whether it's whether it is triggered from the outside or whether it is triggered from the so-called inside, whatever happens, that we see clearly what it is. And that's challenging because we don't see the mirror-like quality of everything. We see the otherness. It's other. And sometimes it gets so extreme that we have the intense paranoia that we have going on in our current social political scene. It's so intense that and civilizations tend to do that, as you all know. You all have studied and so on, probably a lot more than I have. But civilizations don't last. They rise and they fall, and they rise and they fall. And that seems to be what ours is doing in some way, perhaps. Causes and conditions there tend to get different. They're much different now than they were 100 years ago. Much different because of the communication is so intense, and with technology and so on, it's also so easy to meddle with it or fool with it or change it or lie. A similar kind of things is going on in our own mind as we go to our job, interact with our children, interact with our mate, interact with our neighbors and friends, interact with our dharma brothers and sisters, is we tend to believe the thoughts about things. And you might say, well, what else am I going to do? I need to think, I need to evaluate, I need to come to conclusions and ideas and so on. Not really. You could relax a little bit into that. And how do you do that? Practice. All, even though meditation can seem kind of uptight, here I am sitting down. Oh my God, I've got to be here for 4 hours or 3 hours or whatever you've decided on. And we immediately go into some kind of a labyrinth of thought patterns about this and about that and about this and about that. And then we try to stop that or control that, or I can't stop thinking, or I keep fretting about this and fretting about that. And what I'm here to tell you, to say, as I've said many times, and I'll say again, is that's what you need to. That is your object of meditation. I don't teach following the breath and trying to stabilize the mind separate from the very thing that is causing the disruption. I say, look at the disruption and look at it, forever. Look at it until it becomes something else or becomes something else or something else. Song of the Jewel Mirror Samadhi. Why is it a jewel? Because it's so, I'm about to use an epithet, but I've decided not to, since I'm on YouTube. I don't want to get canceled. And I probably could tweet this, though. I think maybe I could probably tweet it, but I don't tweet much. It's a jewel because it's so incredible. It's valuable beyond anything you can imagine, beyond money, beyond billions of this or that. It's valuable. The song of the jewel, mirror samadhi, mirror, reflecting. It's reflecting. And why is it samadhi? Samadhi means not separate, as far as I know, from what Sanskrit word that means not two. So why is it a song? Because it may show up that way. It may show up more as something that shows up and goes away and shows up and goes away. It may show up as a performance. It may show up as an expression. It may show up as music. The song of the jewel, mirror samadhi, Hokkyo Zanmai. So this whole poem or sutra, as we call it a sutra because we chant it every day, or at least we are right now, I believe. It is full of oppositions that are characterized as images. The hiding the heron in the moonlight. A stone woman gets up dancing. Well, a stone woman can't dance, but in this, the stone woman gets up dancing. So some kind of almost a miraculous kind of thing happens out of a fundamental ordinariness of our life. The wooden man begins to sing is another one. Why would somebody in the 9th century say that and have it translated out of the Chinese in such a way that it's very, very descriptive of what he said in Mandarin? It says, it is bright just at midnight. It doesn't appear at dawn. It's bright just at midnight. It doesn't appear at dawn. So to one who is curious about their mind and curious about what this is and has some kind of that curiosity coming out of the human realm, of the 6 realms, the human realm is the one that has the curiosity. It's like what is this? It's not that monkeys don't say, what is this? But usually they're looking for something to eat. But what is this? The curiosity there doesn't last long. Curiosity with a human being can last a long time, a lifetime. What is this? And I would say that's a very good place to, every time you sit down and look at the wall and say, what is this? Take nothing for granted. Assume nothing. Sometimes people will say, well, I've been sitting. Not the same person sitting. You might have to do a whole lot of sitting to realize that if you think you sit 20 days in a row or 10 days in a row, sit more. Practice more. There's a lot of people that don't teach in this way, teach in different ways, and they have their students. And if you're listening to me for the next, half an hour or whatever it is, you're a student of mine, or you could be for a while. You may be a student from now on, and you may not. You may go a different direction. That the right or wrong or extra there. That's totally up to you. You need to carry some of the whatever it is, weight. can continue to talk, or I can take some questions. I like questions. They tend to bring the whole talk into a direction that is probably more interesting than, or maybe more helpful than what I would continue to say.
Junshu bowing. In the analogy, what is the jewel? What in our everyday life is valuable beyond anything else?
The very ultimate nature of who you are and what this is. You're not separate from this fellow 2,500 years ago understood something about the nature of reality, to use a common word, of what is fundamentally the truth, absolute reality. He understood something about it, and he began to share it with others. They might not have liked it. They might have been sent to go study with the Buddha, and they might have been 12 years old and thinking, I don't want to do that. I'd rather stay with Dad and work in the granary or whatever it may be. No, you go study with the Buddha. And that might have connected, and it might not have, depending on what the causes and conditions that arise as any given being. Is this the very thing that brought you onto the screen, or brought these screens into these rooms? Causes and conditions. And so what is valuable is, and it's said in so many different ways and in so many different traditions, it's the jewel in the rubbish heap. In other words, the very, very crap that you're dealing with in your life, your own discomfort and your own not wanting that this doesn't work and this shouldn't happen, or even the real extreme versions, like somebody really close to you just dies. That's a rubbish heap. You get very sick, or your own life becomes threatened, or someone, like in the case of my granddaughter, who's very threatened, and her grandmother just died, which is another big weight on that whole family, because her health is challenged too. But it is a rubbish heap. We know that we're not trying to cover it over with some kind of God realm, like we're all going to heaven. We're not doing that. If you're in this particular lineage, you could go to any one of those realms and serve there. Save all beings. Nobody wants to go to hell. Nobody wants to go to the jealous God realm, or no one. If they understand it, they don't even want to go to the God realm, because it's so blind. It's just we're so enamored of our wonderful life and all of our money and all of our control and all of our possessions or credentials. It doesn't last. 10 minutes, 10 years, not that much difference. I'm sure you've noticed, those of you who've been around a little while, notice that time is kind of an odd thing. It's unreal. There isn't anything but this. The body-mind complex conditions and reifies and establishes some kind of continuity where something that's here gets older and older, or grows more and more tired, more weak, and eventually passes away. Sickness, aging, and death. That's what the Buddha saw when he walked out of the temple. He saw that, and what he did is he looked, to respond to your question, Junshu, which I've not forgotten. He, instead of running away from that back into the temple and smoothing everything over and doing what his dad wanted, which is to become the prince and become a universal monarch, instead he went into the forest. What is this? Sickness, aging, and death. What is this fundamentally? What is it, rather than what do people think it is? What do the Brahmins think it is? What do the Jains think it is? What does my dad think it is? How can I find out? So then over time, through practicing and looking, training his mind, I wasn't there, of course, but as far as we know, he began to understand something. And he also went out and tortured himself. He went without food. If you read any of the stories, he kind of went through a whole bunch of things that we don't have to go through, particularly. Just train your mind. And then what happened 2,500 years ago is going to it will look a lot different culturally then than it does now, of course, or even 100 years ago. Pardon me. So the jewel is to look into the difficulty, the difficulty that you, Junchu, or anyone else, any kind of negativity that has arisen in your body-mind complex in the last 24 hours is the jewel. That's the jewel. It's just covered up with rubbish. And the rubbish that it's covered up with are the conclusions, ideas, opinions, judgments, hope, and fear, and all those other structures that keep you from seeing the fundamental reality that is in front of you, which is a dharmakaya, the fundamental awakened nature that cannot be stopped by death. It can't be stopped by anything because it is not started. It is not arising. Something arises, it's going down. If you try to do this with your thinking process, you might have some success. You might have some relative success. You might write a few books on Buddhism. Go ahead. They might even be helpful, especially if it tells you how to meditate. But you, me, we have to see this ourselves. This is what the Buddha basically said. He saw this and he pointed to it, and he has lots of, as other teachers have had down through the centuries, different concepts and ideas about how to understand what this is. Some of them are quite well known and famous. Some of them are kind of obscure, but are still important to study. So when we have this intense feeling, the thing that makes it so difficult to see the incredible purity of our minds is that we grasp onto some things and we push away other things. And it can be very subtle or it can be obvious. And when we, me or you, any of us or sitting in a room somewhere and have negative emotions come up that are very painful or difficult, we don't just experience them, we do something with them. We have some kind of attribution. We blame someone, we blame something, we blame what we ate, we blame. And it's not that some of that isn't true. That's why it's so damn hard, is because somebody did actually come in and insult you, or someone did cause you to lose your job, or someone did take your spouse away from you, or something did happen where someone really close to you that you really liked decided they don't want to be your friend anymore and won't tell you why. They just don't want anything to do with you anymore. And if they do try to tell you why, that's not exactly what you want to hear. You don't want to hear the actual explanation. You all know what I'm talking about. So if you can hold your seat, so to say, metaphorically speaking, hold your seat and look at whatever shows up. I'm saying anything. Everything is a Dharma gate if you can do it. But you may not just Junshu, but anyone may not be able to be ready to do this in that direct a way until you do it in little ways. And how do you do that? Sit down, hold still, and start practicing on relating to whatever arises in the mind without agreeing, without disagreeing, and without ignoring. And in that way, you're training your mind to see more and more clearly what this fundamentally is by just using your own thought patterns. Because anytime a thought arises, this is a living being. Same thing. It comes, you think it for 30 seconds, or it's like a dream, a memory of a dream. You have a memory of a dream. It seemed like something happened. You notice that you can actually, until you get as old as I am, you can tell the difference between a memory of a dream and a memory of something that happened. Gets worse. Much more fun. Did I dream I was the king of Prussia? Or was I actually the king of Prussia? Don't help me with this one, please. I'll handle it. So the jewel part is when someone has realized this, one realizes deeply that most everyone is ignoring it or looking away. They don't see it, and they tend to torture themselves and others and fight with themselves and have all kinds of really difficult stuff happen in their life. And you don't know if you're coming back here. Death comes without warning. This body will be a corpse. At that time, the dharma will be my only help. I must practice it with exertion. What is the dharma? The truth. I don't have to join Buddhism. I don't require any. Somebody wants to talk to me, I don't require anything. Don't even require them to come back. That's up to you. I trust you. When I say I trust you, I trust the karma that brought you, causes and conditions that brought you in front of this situation, same as the causes and conditions that brought me in front of the Satguru or the true teacher. I couldn't have concocted that. But without meeting a true teacher, I could not be here. I could not be doing this. Not that I'm doing anything all that important. Junju, anything further about that?
No, thank you. There is a question from Shane Thompson on YouTube.
Yes, Shane.
He asks, can you talk about the opening the eye mind practice and how it relates to seeing the jewel mirror?
So the practice workshops that I teach, sometimes called opening the eye mind, is just a way of using the eye consciousness and emphasizing that in such a way that it cuts into the thinking process or sets aside the thinking process using some techniques so that one is able to emphasize what one sees in a much more powerful way than what one thinks. We don't really realize that we're thinking about what we're seeing. We think we're seeing what we're thinking, but we're actually thinking about what we're seeing. You don't actually see what's in front of you. I'm not accusing you of anything. And if you were to say, no, I think I do see Sokuzan, I think I really do, I would not argue with you. I would just say, oh, okay. I guess I was wrong about you. But we don't see what is in front of us. If you see what is in front of us, I can tell you how you will know. You don't know what it is. I don't care if you're looking at a Lamborghini. You don't know what that is. And if you do know what it is, then you're looking at your ideas about what that is rather than the Lamborghini. So if you were to see what look at a Lamborghini and see what that was, it would be just like you were from another planet and had never heard of what's called the automobile. It would look like if it looked like anything, it would look like an abstract piece of sculpture, totally meaningless. So opening the eye mind, not to go off into that particular, but just a practice, a way of setting up a structure so that it kind of interferes with the tendency of the thinking process to grasp on to what it's seeing. So, and I like to do that. You can do that with anything, but I like to do it with paintings, works, especially works of artwork that are powerful pieces that are well known, particularly, but don't have to be. Several exercises for that. I can answer other questions about that. I just don't want to continue to talk about opening the eye mind exercises. If somebody asks me to do those again, I'll do them again. I usually do things by request, unless I don't.
Evan, oh, sorry, go on.
In that example of the Lamborghini, if we see that we've been conditioned to keep seeing that as a car,
yes.
Is there something else that is there to be seen?
Yeah, so the truth. That nothing is separate. You're not separate from anything anywhere. You're not separate from your thoughts. You're not separate from the Lamborghini. You're not separate from that which comes together as an object and hangs in there for 50 years and has a name, and you're not separate from any of that. But you without some kind of understanding of the basic teaching, one of the basic teachings of Buddhism is emptiness of self. Nobody here, and emptiness of other. Nothing out there. Until one has gone through that understanding, one cannot necessarily come back and deal with the actual Lamborghini, which is not separate from its name, how it looks, your imputations about it, or that it is empty of anything separate. To see that all at once is what I'm endeavoring to talk about.
How does seeing the the automobile quality of that prevent us from seeing the truth of the situation?
Attachment, because we're attached to what we think, because that has a direct bearing on how safe we are. Ego does not want to be, ego is because it's unreal, we have to constantly fluff it up and puff it up and shield it from everything. Because if you actually saw who you are, you'd be fearless. I mean, if anybody even used that appellation to talk about you, because you would not be afraid of anything. It wouldn't be a credential, so it wouldn't show up as you're going out and running into a pack of wolves because you're so fearless. There'd be nothing to prove. But the fear is gone. It's not that the wolves are gone. The wolves could be more intense. The Lamborghini, the actual grasping at the Lamborghini could be even more intense, because now the grasping is freed to be what it is, rather than somebody who's grasping. It has to be done with a consciousness. You can't think your way into this. Look what happened to Nagarjuna. He started right after he wrote the In Praise of Dharmadhatu. He started having immediate migraines, one right after another. Sorry, I just made that up.
Can we see that we're lopping the Lamborghini into our concept of automobile and see the truth at the same time?
Paraphrase yourself.
Sure, bowing. Can we see that we're adding to that and still see the truth?
Yes, that is the truth. To see that you're adding, that is the truth. Just see all you have to do is be aware, and you actually see that the adding is also no adding, because there isn't any. There is nothing that is substantial. It just looks like it. It's an incredible illusion. That's why it's called a mirror-like, because it's such an incredible illusion. And the closer you get to it, the further away it recedes. More, please, if you have it.
How can something at one point prevent us from seeing the truth, but also be included in that truth?
Because it's not separate. That's why you can't do it with logic. You can't do it with reason. You can't because it transcends all of it. It goes beyond all of that. More, if you have it, please. You could say, Sokuzan, why don't you paraphrase yourself?
Sokuzan, why don't you paraphrase yourself?
No, not gonna. You can't make me. You're not the boss of me. Go ahead with your question if you have another one, Shoto.
What's so dissatisfying about that response?
Yeah, it's because of desire. We want some kind of a satisfaction or feeling of accomplishment, or aha, I got it. Some kind of an aha. This is why people do. I mean, I'm not accusing anybody of anything, but this is why people do crossword puzzles. Is because you get an aha. You get an aha. Oh, yeah, that's the word. That little kind of payoff, a little payoff. We don't get with the spiritual path. You are not going to get a payoff. Sorry, my friends. If you want relative truth, I've got all kinds of things you can do to get a payoff. But if you want ultimate truth, it's not going to be a payoff, because you actually transcend this world while your body-mind complex is still here. It is completely ordinary, and it's so miraculous that you can't even talk about it. There aren't words to describe this. It's like I'm speaking out of a huge vacuum.
Kevin bowing.
Yes, Kevin.
Sokuzan, when we do the opening the I-mind practice, we are training ourselves to see what's there and notice how we're adding on to it. How does a practice like the song of the Jewel Mirror of Samadhi, which is so rich with its own imagery, how does that help us in a similar way?
I don't know if it's, maybe it's similar, but the idea there is that if you contemplate those images, because they flip back and forth, and the intention of the Dongshan Lianqi or Tozan Ryokai is he understands something, and so he's written this. And if you read the whole thing, and it's fairly long, it's longer than a Sandokai, and he keeps going back and forth. And I'm not even sure it was written by the same person, because some of the images and metaphors in there are more clunky. At least when they're translated into English, they are. In Chinese, ancient Chinese, like the one that talks about the I Ching, uses the hexagrams and trigrams and so on. And you have to really know something about that. And in ancient times, you would know, because it would be more a classical, cultural kind of situation. But the way in which this would work is to help give you one, like the stone woman gets up dancing is a powerful. It's like something that can't dance, something that's made of stone. There's a piece of sculpture. It just starts to dance. So that using that shows us what that is. And then when we come to, but it has to be done through awareness practice, through sitting and contemplating that and contemplating. It's like a koan, yet it doesn't have a puzzle kind of answer like some of the koans, the traditional 100 koans out of the Rinzai lineage of Linqi. So those are, some people need that kind of practice. They should go do it. But what we're talking about here is between this kind of understanding of the Hokkyo Zanmai and the kind of understanding that I am endeavoring to help people with, called opening the eye mind, which is people, if they're not meditators, they can still do this practice. And there's several other ones besides, one of them is, so some of you that don't know what this is, one of the main practices is you look at a painting. You could look at anything. You look at a tree stump, but look at a painting, and then you use your peripheral vision. You go over and you collect this object over here, this bright red circle. And then over here, you go over and you collect, in other words, register in consciousness, a green tabletop with some flowers on it in a painting. And maybe the circle is maybe a pillow or something. And you use those, and you use your peripheral vision to go back and forth. When you use the peripheral vision, which is very difficult to do with other senses, although a little bit with sound, when you use that, you start to acknowledge the space, that the illusion of space that is between those things. And that's the area where the conceptual mind starts to get locked up so that it can't see clearly. It sees what it thinks rather than it sees what it sees. So what you're doing is you're liberating, just like sitting meditation, you're liberating the thinking process from the awareness, simply put. It's just like, if you try to do it aggressively, it's like Velcro. It's not going to move. But if you just look at it, the very Velcro begins to dissolve because it cannot withstand prajna. It cannot withstand that samadhi, that incredible prajna paramita, awareness wisdom that looks, and doesn't claim, doesn't assume, and doesn't deny. Whereas in the open in the eye mind, we're taking one particular sense, and this is quite often appealing to artists, so it's not just for artists, and it's kind of a setup so that you can begin to see the fundamental nature of what's in front of you. And if it's a beautiful painting, sometimes that's possible for you to actually see what the artist, he or she or themselves, were actually endeavoring to bring about by orchestrating these shapes and colors. It's similar in music. But 1,000 musicians and 1,000 artists are all doing something totally, they have the same medium, but they are doing completely different things, just like 1,000 meditators, all doing something different. So this, as I often say to people, if this doesn't make sense to you, then go do something else. But if this does make sense, then train your mind. I'll help you. That's just simply put. I'll help you no matter what. I don't have a choice. It's choiceless for me to do this. Not because I'm this great, wonderful person. No, actually, I'm very vain and self-centered. I have been since I was born. It has not changed. I couldn't teach if I was better than everybody. Somehow I'd gotten over my vanity. It's still there. It's what's different? Nobody's home anymore.
Kevin Bowing,
Yes, Kevin.
in the text, Song of the Jewel Mirror Samadhi,
Yes.
on one level, it is an artwork. I mean, it's so evocative with so many rich images. Are we missing the point if we are engaging it as an art object? Bowing.
Not at all. No, you meet everything where it's at. So, and this is the fun, the interesting part about it. If you're meeting everything where it's at, then it's meeting you where you're at. And like it says here, turning away and touching are both wrong. It's like a massive fire. And where's the other one? Form and image, behold each other. It's like facing a jewel mirror. It's an astonishing situation because it's not like this dead painting is looking at you, but the nature of vision, the nature of seeing is not limited to individuals living or dead. It's already the case. It's not limited to eyeballs or light shining on objects and reflecting. Not limited to that. And the way I usually do this is to try to give people an idea. And this is a shallow area of it, but because it is profound and vast beyond this, I just say, imagine a basketball covered with a blue sweatshirt. Got it? See what I'm saying? This is available, y'all. This is so available. Your mind is so available to you. But when I say that, then you could say I trigger something in the nature of it. So we do that together. 10 minutes ago, you wouldn't be thinking of that. And I'm deliberately picking out some kind of mundane, ordinary thing. But this is what in the Tibetan tradition and the creation completion practices of imagining your wisdom mind as a deity. This is what deity yoga is about. I don't think you need to do that. But perhaps you do.
Kevin Bowing, I'm struck by
Yes.
my kind of assumption about this material as like, oh, well, these contradictory images are just meant to kind of stop my mind and make me realize that I don't know anything. But from what you've just said, maybe there's maybe beyond that is the sense that like the words are giving me access to my own mind to see this impossible thing very clearly, and that I can enjoy that.
Of course, you can enjoy it. You can actually receive what's showing up. If there's something, there's always a beyond. Anytime there's something, there's a beyond. And when there's nothing there, then this is the beyond. This is the other world. This is it. There's nowhere to go. There's nothing to do. But you could train your mind, and you could save all beings, help others. Even the people who are incredibly torturing themselves with their beliefs and their opinions, their hopes and their fears. And one of the ways you can help them is don't meddle with them. But don't abandon them either. Run away. Very difficult. And pretty impossible to do unless you're unless you're in the midst of being as genuine and honest and sincere with your own thought patterns as you can, which is just watch what moves. And anything that comes up that is challenging, then you'll be able to meet it as it is rather than your ideas about it, your opinions, or your blame. And as I often say, it's not that people aren't doing things and somebody isn't to blame or the situation is to blame. That's the relative truth. And there's a relative truth everywhere. But the fundamental nature is ultimate. And you have to see it.
Ian Bowing.
Yes, Ian.
So when we're looking at the wall, is the wall more like the image or the mirror?
Yeah, there's the same thing. It's like a mirror looking at a mirror. You've heard of that before, haven't you? It's like you take two mirrors. You've heard that one joke where you take two mirrors, you put them in a room, and then you go back out and you wonder what they're talking about.
I hadn't heard that, but I like it.
I just made it up. So I'm just saying that you're free to do anything with it. That kind of freedom is it's not a freedom to do something particularly, or freedom not to do something, or freedom to. It's not that kind of freedom. It's ultimate freedom, which means that you're so free that you can be a complete egomaniac and on the crown of the Buddha's crown chakra. I mean, it's that kind of liberation.
Thank you.
Thank you.
June Valley.
Yes.
Question from Michael Worthington.
Michael.
Can seeing the attachment make the ego more attached?
Yes. But it's not about detaching. It's about seeing the attachment. And yes, you might not be more attached. You might just realize that you have always been more attached, but you're just seeing more of it now. Meditation practice tends to, without some help, it tends to be something that's kind of disappointing, and you're not getting anywhere, and you might be doing this wrong. You need to do a meditation that feels better. Sometimes I'll have some people come to me and say, why would I open my eyes? I feel better when I close my eyes and meditate. And then I might say, depending on who it is, well, of course, that's feel better when you sleep too. Close your eyes. So it's not wrong. People just have a different kind of a way of working with the whole thing. And sometimes they just need to be told, no, keep your eyes open, because this is how we live, with our eyes open. So this is the way you want to meditate. And all you're really doing when you meditate, it's very simple. You don't have to do fancy mantras, although we do some. You don't have to do fancy visualizations, although we do some. You don't do a terrible lot of them, but we do some because they're important. But all you really have to do is hold still and watch what continues to move. It seems to be that simple and that profoundly difficult. It takes a lifetime.
A question from James.
James.
You've mentioned an older saying of prajna being, from what I can remember, sounding like par prajna.
Yeah.
Could I have your insight on this older saying of prajna and its context?
It's just, I think what I said is prajna paramita. Paramita means crossing over. So prajna is the wisdom that is crossed over. The jna or nya is wisdom, and pra is extensive. So it's seeing through the duality of things, prajna. Seeing through this and that. And paramita is I don't know. Chisho, what is it? You have the exact translation of paramita for us out of Sanskrit?
Chisho, I look it up, and then I don't want to put in my 2 cents. I look it up and let you know.
Okay. Well, yeah. Well, then I'll continue to put in my 2 cents. So that's also the name of the Prajnaparamita literature's early translations by Edward Kanzi back in the 30s and 40s. And there's a Prajnaparamita in 10,000 lines and 20,000 lines. And then there's the one that we chant, which is very short. And we chant the heart part of the Heart Sutra is one of the smallest parts, along with the Diamond Sutra of the Prajnaparamita literature, and it's just talking about the nature of reality over and over and over again. And there's the mantra in there is gone, gone, gone beyond, gone completely beyond. So be it, or awake. And so it's just a structure, a way of saying something and repeating something. And the idea is to transcend the whole this and that idea. There's lots of material there. Red Pine has an excellent book on the Heart Sutra and another one on the Diamond Sutra that are translations and also commentaries of those two smaller forms of the Prajnaparamita literature. Much easier than Kanzi, Conze, much easier than his material. I wouldn't say it's better. It's just his is much more scholarly and involved.
Kishabhami. So paramita, the last if it's a longer one, paramita,
Yes.
it stands for complete attainment or perfection in, or transcendental virtue.
Very good. Yeah, it's the perfection of prajna paramita. Thank you. So paramita. So prajna paramita. It's just saying the perfection, the perfection of wisdom in 10,000 lines, the perfection of wisdom in the Heart Sutra, the perfection of wisdom in the Diamond Sutra. And it's if you read those and study those, which we do occasionally at the monastery, get together once a day. Are we doing any of those right now?
Not the Diamond Sutra.
We're not doing Diamond or Heart Sutra. We have in the past. So that's a very good thing to study with others because they're very simple. And if you read them on your own, which you can, it's really good to have someone to talk to about that, not just a teacher, but other people who are studying the material too, because other people have other ideas of how this material shows up. Since it's transcendent material, it's just good to discuss it with Sangha, Buddha, Dharma, Sangha, teacher, teaching community.
There's a question from Langton, who's in London.
Langton.
It's kind of a two-part question.
Yes.
He asks, do you agree with the notion that there are as many paths as there are souls? And how do you regard lay or practice outside a tradition?
Well, as many practices as there are souls. The whole idea of soul is that there's some kind of a centeredness that goes on from lifetime to lifetime, and I'm particularly agree with that since you asked me in that way. But I don't really disagree either. I don't know. I'm not. It seems to be a lot of different ways. Just my experience is people are practicing this way or that way, and some people need a. I say don't interfere with anybody's practices. If somebody's a Christian and they're doing okay, then leave them alone. Don't argue it at all. Don't even mention Buddhism to them if you can help it. Let them drag it out of you, I sometimes say, because that's the only way it's even going to be meaningful. And what was the other part of the question?
How do you regard practice outside a tradition?
Okay. I think it's possible to do some of that, but it's unlikely. And the reason, well, let's put it this way. I'll use my own example. There's no way I would have done this without meeting my guru or my Tibetan Vajra master. There's no way I would do this. I was, well, I still am, but it's somewhat different, but it's, I was so wrapped up in my ability to understand this material back in the 60s. I was reading Edward Kanzi. I was reading the Heart Sutra and the Diamond Sutra, the Prajnaparamita literature, the translation out of the Sanskrit. And I was reading everything else I could get on Buddhism or meditation, from Alexander David Neal to Alan Watts to W.Y. Evans Wentz to there's more of them, Krishnamurti. Jiddu Krishnamurti. I read I think there's 7 or 8 of his books. I read all of those. And, but I didn't have any way of, I could think about it. I could do it intellectually. And I was probably irritating the hell out of other people by trying to explain the nature of reality based on what I just read 10 minutes ago. And then I stumbled into the Vidyadhara, Chogyam Trungpa Rinpoche, and began to train my mind. So I had to go back to square one. All the reading and everything I'd done I could see that was interesting and meant a lot and everything, but I could not apply it to my life. I had to be able to apply it to my life. And if someone is up in their head, as I was, pretty hard to do that. You still have to stop reading that wonderful book you keep, you're in love with that material, because when you read it, it gives you the feeling that you know what I'm talking about. All of you do. I'm saying put the book down or read the book with a group of people where you have to actually study the material. You actually have to talk about the nature of this concept or that concept. You might even have to look up words you thought you knew what they meant. They don't. I think it's very difficult to do it on your own. And you could become a Pratyeka Buddha and do this on your own, but it's very hard to know how to include others if you think they're separate from you. If you think you're the one who's attaining liberation, and you think they're the ones who are the poor things, they don't understand the nature of reality like I do. Of course, I've been on my path and climbing the mountain, going into retreat, and yeah, you know what I say about that. I'm not even going to repeat it. At the same time I say that, that might be the only thing they can do. This might be their lifetime where they need to do it that way, because 3 lifetimes from now, they'll run into the Buddha. But they can't do that until they've gone up and down the mountain by themselves for a while, thinking they know stuff. So it's basically, Trungpa Rinpoche talks about it in Cutting Through Spiritual Materialism. So maybe, unlikely. It's also very difficult, even if you do have a teacher, if you do have a path, even if you do all of this, and I know people have practiced way longer than I have, are very, very knowledgeable but they are not awake. How do I know? I was going to say, trust me. And then I thought, no, I'm not going to do that. They're not awake because there's still some kind of identity operating there that needs something else. They need something. They need to be appreciated. They need to be acknowledged. And the only way I need to be acknowledged is to have everybody adore me and drop at my feet and send me money. Unyo's the only one laughing, so apparently that wasn't that funny.
Karan bowing.
Yes.
Sokuzan, if we see things as not separate, does compassion automatically arise? Could you speak about that?
I'll try. So compassion is not a feeling. It's not an emotion. It may have an emotional charge to it, but it's not a feeling. You just see clearly that you don't have to have compassion. If you just cut your hand, you don't think, I need to be compassionate for that poor hand that I've just cut. I'm going to be compassionate, and I'm going to go in the bathroom, and I'm going to get a Band-Aid, and I'm going to be compassionate to my hand. It's a silly metaphor, but it's like that. When you start to see the people that are suffering, they are you. They're your children. They're your mothers. It's a family. And you see it intensely, even with people who are really mean and suffering and blaming you for stuff, or blaming their neighbors, or fighting, or walking down the street with an AK-47 wanting to kill people. They still are operating out of intense delusion of separation. So when you see what this is, when you train your mind to see what this is, then the compassion arises, but it's not recognizable as a feeling. It's not a sad feeling about poor people that are hurting or something. The feeling I have for inmates in prison is not a sad feeling. That's karma. They're in prison. What I'll do if I get into a prison, I'll go in there and teach them how to train their mind. But I don't feel sorry for them. I mean, if I feel sorry for anything, I feel sorry for the whole world, the whole system. But it's not an emotion. This doesn't, because I'll say it to you this way, and I've said this before. If the true emotion of compassion hits you, you might die. Because it's not emotion, it's an overwhelming understanding. The symbol for that was put forth by teachers in the past is Avalokiteshvara, the Bodhisattva. Chenrezig is the Tibetan for the Bodhisattva of compassion, comes down and looks at the suffering of the world. His name is Avalokita, or sound observer. He hears the suffering of the world. And what does he do? He weeps. And then he can't, because of his nature, because of his ultimate nature, even though he's a bodhisattva, can't come down just because of that nature. But his tears, this is a symbol, his tears turn into white Tara and green Tara. And one is active and one is more wisdom. And they come down, and then those beings. It's just a way of talking about it, a way of helping you understand that you can't really do this directly, because if you start to do it directly, then you separate yourself from it. So just images, they're using images. to do that. As His Holiness the 16th Karmapa was in Hong Kong once back in I think it was the late 70s, and he walked in Hong Kong. He walked out on the veranda or something to look at the city at night and everything, and he collapsed. He couldn't withstand what he saw. So as I'm saying, you don't really want to. It's not a nice little feeling that you can feel good about. The poor people, or here, I'll help these poor people, or the poor person with the cardboard sign. I feel so sad about them. I'm not saying you can't have that. I'm not saying get rid of it, but it's not compassion. Compassion is completely ruthless. It does not. There's no favorites there at all. There can't be. So if you were begin to feel this in a relative way, you might have a heart attack, or you might collapse on the floor because of the overwhelming surge. Or not. What I would say is just keep practicing. Sit a lot. I'll take a final question since we're past our time, but I can take one more if there's a good. Wendy? Wendy, go ahead.
When you are talking about seeing compassion and dying, are you only talking about this physical existence, not our true selves?
So I didn't hear the first part of the question, Wendy, when I was talking about, you said I was talking about something, and I don't remember talking about that. So.
Wendy Rowling, when you were answering Hakaran's question, you said if we were to experience true compassion, we would either collapse or die.
Yes. Yeah. And what was the question?
Wendy Bowing, were you talking about this physical existence as being the thing that dies rather than our true selves?
Yeah. Your true self has not been born, so therefore it can't die. It's to be very literal about it. It's just it is at once in another dimension because it's hidden. It's like a heron hidden in the moonlight, but when you see it, it's this dimension. But you have to see it. And if you see it, you won't congratulate yourself or anyone. There'll be no conclusion. There'll be no credential. So when I'm saying that, I'm just saying most people aren't going to experience that kind of situation because it's impossible to hold up because you're in a relative situation, and that kind of relative consideration for all beings, save all beings, if it was taken on by an individual consciousness, it would be very difficult for that individual consciousness. I'm not saying it necessarily would die, but it might fall over, like His Holiness the 16th fell on the floor and was so overwhelmed by the suffering that he saw out over Hong Kong. It was in the late 70s, I think, before he passed away in 1981. Interesting. His Holiness the 16th Karmapa, the head of the Kagyu lineage of Tibetan Buddhism, passed in 1981, and his Toku, the 17th Karmapa, was born in 1985 or something like that. Was it 85? Yeah. But anyway, that particular, I think he's supposed to be an incarnation of Avalokiteshvara, and so is His Holiness Dalai Lama. I think I might have it confused. I'm not really a scholar in that area, but it's just a way of talking about it. But it brings people into a realm of understanding that they might not get to otherwise. That doesn't mean they understand it, but it moves one's thinking process and mind and understanding and perception into areas that don't make a lot of sense. They don't add up. if you need things to add up, then good luck.
Dedicate to merit.
You can dedicate to merit in the Zendo, if you would, please.
May the merit of this penetrate into all places, so that we and every sentient being together can realize the Buddha's way. Jewel the 10 directions, the 3 worlds, all Buddhas, all venerable ones, Bodhisattvas, Mahasattvas, the great Prajna, Paramita. O Buddhas and Bodhisattvas of the 10 directions and the 3 times, please hear us. Please come down out of the light and protect Sokuzan Buddhist Temple Monastery, our Sangha, families, friends, and visitors. Heal everyone who is unhappy, sick, or suffering, and fill them with light.
Que siempre seas feliz. May everybody be happy for the rest of the day.